Her mom sold her to be used for a ritual. 6-year-old Jocelyn Smith was from South Africa and was always known to have a beautiful smile on her face. On February 19th of 2024, Jocelyn was not feeling well, and instead of her mom Kelly staying home to take care of her, she left her alone with her boyfriend Jochen. By the time Kelly arrived home, Jocelyn was missing. Now, Kelly didn't seem worried at all. She continued with her day as normal and even went on a trip a couple days later. Neighbors in the area were worried and searching for Jocelyn, while Kelly, on the other hand, was completely chill and didn't have a care in the world. People in the local community started talking and found out that Kelly sold Jocelyn. She had sold her to a traditional healer in South Africa known as a Sangoma, and they wanted her for her eyes and skin. Jocelyn's body parts would be used in rituals in return for money. A local pastor had testified that he had once heard Kelly talking about selling Jocelyn for $1,100 but would go down to $275 if she needed to. Kelly, her boyfriend Jochen, and a friend named Savino were all arrested in connection to Jocelyn's disappearance. In May of 2025, the three were all found guilty, and even though there was no evidence, the testimonies is what did it, and the three were sentenced to life in prison. When they got their sentence, Kelly was shedding some tears, and their friend Stavino was smiling and had no remorse whatsoever. To this day, Jocelyn's body has not been recovered.
When an April Fool's Day prank goes insanely wrong. Lin Sang-hao and Huan Yang were roommates together at the prestigious medical school of Fudan University. Reportedly, while rooming together, the two had multiple disagreements, grudges against each other, and for lack of better words, they were not friends. So come the end of March, Lin overheard that Huang was planning with his buddies some April Fool's Day pranks, so Lin had the bright idea of getting his roommate first before his roommate could prank him. Well, Lin's prank sent his roommate straight to the hospital extremely sick, and he ended up passing away from multiple organ failures. And Lin admitted to the investigators that he was just trying to pull a little prank on his roommate by putting, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce this because I know I'm going to butcher it, but he put this substance in their water supply, essentially poisoning his roommate. And this was a medical student. Like, I would not want this guy being my doctor. Lin was found guilty and sentenced to death over this stupid April Fool's Day prank. And Lin actually had a lot of supporters who started a petition against his sentence, but he was ultimately executed in 2015. I know this is kind of seen as a controversial case, so let me know what your opinions are in the comments. Personally, I mean, he admitted to using the substance because he wanted to make his roommate sick. So even though he didn't mean for him to pass away, a person's life still ended, and you admitted to doing it.
She was found burned in a dumpster, but before any of that happened, she posted this.
If you find my dismembered body laying all over Kokomo, John Christie, okay?
Brandy Bradley was living with her best friend when he brutally beat her and burned what was left of her body in a dumpster. On January 19th, Jonathan Christie went home and saw Brandy visibly upset, but instead of conversation, he grabs a heavy-duty wrench and beats her. And as though that was not enough, he then grabs a plastic bag, forces it over her head, and grabs a belt and just starts suffocating and choking her till she's no longer alive. Jonathan calls a friend and he goes, "Yeah, man, I'll pay you $500 if you help me with this job." We're gonna go ahead and call this unknown friend Scott. Now, Scott ain't gonna let $500 go out the window, so he heads to the house, and when he walks inside, he sees Brandy's body with a plastic bag, damn near vacuum sealed, to her face, and a belt choking her neck. Together, they grab Brandy's unalive body, stuff her into Jonathan's truck, and then they drive down the road to a nearby dumpster. They take her body out of the truck and throw her inside the dumpster, and Jonathan proceeds to pour gasoline all over her body and sets her on fire. And then this monster just walks away. Before Jonathan even murdered Brandy, Brandy had called the police 5 times within 1 month, fearing for her life, because Jonathan would choke her to the point of unconsciousness over and over and over again.
I've been choked out 5 times to unconsciousness.
Every single time Brandy called the police about Jonathan assaulting her, they did nothing. They left her inside that home with the same man that would later take Brandy's life, bro. After Brandy's murder, witnesses later told police that they actually remember Jonathan spray painting his truck and asking around for burn piles to discard some items, whatever that could mean. Brandy's family will not hear from her for weeks, and it isn't until 1 month after her disappearance that they actually chose to file a missing persons report. While police were tracking Jonathan's steps from the night that Brandy disappeared, they were led to a dumpster with obvious signs that a fire had been lit inside. While digging through a whole bunch of trash and ashes built up inside that dumpster, police discovered the remains of a belt, a necklace, and bones. The bones consisted of an arm, ribs, and finger bones. Forensics were able to determine that these were the remains of Brandy Bradley by February 15th. Now, Jonathan was arrested for the suspicion of Brandy's murder, but police still lacked a lot of evidence to take it to trial, but it wasn't until Jonathan made a call inside of prison walls that made them investigate further. Now, in this call, Jonathan is talking to a man, and he says, "Did you tell them I did it?" Now, do you guys remember Scott, our unnamed friend? It turns out Scott confessed everything he and Jonathan did that night, hoping that he won't get charged for her murder too. Even more suspicious was an evacuation letter sent to Brandy on February 9th, 3 weeks after her murder, that Jonathan likely enforced. It was almost as though Jonathan used that as a backup plan to excuse why Brandy all of a sudden went missing. We're still awaiting trial, but it sickens me to know that Brandy could have been alive if 1, law enforcement did not fail her and ignore her needs, and 2, her best friend actually would have been her best friend and not the person who would take her life away. Like I always say, be safe and watch your back, because it really be the people closest to you.
This case is sure to shock and disturb you with a twist ending that you'll never see coming. In 1992, Gail Eastwood was living with her parents. She was nannying full-time for a family that she liked, and she was dating this guy named Mark Ritchie. Life was pretty good for Gail until she realized that she was pregnant, a secret that she didn't tell anyone. And then one day, while caring for the kids that Gail nannied for, she gave birth in the bathroom alone to a baby boy. Gail claimed that she didn't know what to do, so she put the infant in a trash bag and kept that trash bag in her car's trunk for several days before dumping the bag in the woods. Gail would later go back and forth whether or not the baby was born stillborn or if she didn't know if the baby was born alive or not. Not long later, the infant's body was discovered, a discovery that shocked the entire community. And the community raised money for his funeral, and the funeral was attended by over 150 people. And Gail would go about her life as normal. She ended up marrying Mark Ritchie, having 3 more children, never telling anyone what she did. Years and years would go by, but the investigators were still determined to solve this case. And as DNA and genetic genealogy became more advanced, they were able to narrow down their search right back to Gail's front door, 26 years after she left her infant in the woods. As soon as she saw the police officers walking up her driveway, she admitted what she did. While being questioned, the investigators asked Gail if she had ever done anything like this before, reminding her that they had her DNA now. And that's when Gail admitted that she did the exact same thing to another baby 2 years before she did it to her son. Gail ended up drawing a map to where investigators could find this baby's body, but sadly, that baby's body was never uncovered. Gail was offered a plea deal, which had the possibility of her only getting let off with probation, but she declined and ended up with life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Some people are seriously sick. And shout out to my mom for this case suggestion.
This supermarket was left behind and everything remained inside. The Mexia Market is a 36,000 square foot grocery store located in Fort Worth, Texas. In 1999, the Mexia supermarket went bankrupt. Instead of removing the goods that were inside, the owners just took all the money that they had, fled the country, and left everything as it was. The food inside the supermarket would have been sold on a clearance sale or donated, but that was not the case, and it caused a serious biohazard. After a while, neighbors started reporting a horrible smell coming from the supermarket, and the city was called to the site. Once they went inside of the building, they saw so many flies and rats going around the whole area attacking the food that if they were to demolish or burn down the building, that those insects/animals would go to nearby businesses and homes. High levels of toxic gases were escaping the building due to decaying materials inside. It got to the point that nearby residents couldn't even use their air conditioning because they were afraid that those toxic chemicals would come into their home. The city came up with a plan to fumigate it so that the pests inside would not survive. It got so bad with the toxic gas that the pests inside were struggling to survive. With knowing this, whoever was entering the building needed to take every precaution and make sure that they had the right kind of equipment on so that they would not suffocate to death from the fumes. Once the cleanup was officially done, many people were very angry that all this food was wasted and could have been donated to local food banks for people in need.
How do you not know that your 3 friends have been dead in your backyard for 3 days? And why would you not call the police? Everyone should be talking about this case because it's insane. On Sunday, January 7th, these 3 men went to their friend's house in Kansas City, Missouri to watch the Kansas City Chiefs football game. The men were Ricky Johnson, David Harrington, and Clayton McGeeney, and the house that they went to watch the game was being rented by their friend Jordan Willis. That was the last time that anyone ever heard from these men. After days of not being able to contact them, Clayton's fiance went to Jordan's home on the 5200 block of Northwest 83rd Terrace in Northland, and it was there that she discovered all of the men's cars still parked in the driveway, including Clayton's. After knocking on the door but receiving no answer, she eventually broke into the basement of the home, and she began loudly calling out for Jordan and announcing that she was there, but still she got no answer. After going further into the house, she discovered a dead body outside on the back porch, and she then called the Kansas City police. This all happened at around 10 p.m. on Tuesday night. When authorities arrived, they discovered 2 more dead bodies outside in the backyard, and unfortunately, they all belonged to Ricky, David, and Clayton. But this is where the story starts to get odd. It was only after police arrived that the resident of the home and the men's friend Jordan came out of a bedroom. But he reportedly came out really calm in his boxers and holding an empty wine glass as if nothing was wrong. Jordan then told police and later his family that it seems as though his friend simply froze to death, yet he never once called police to report the bodies. According to a Facebook post made by a friend of the 3 men found deceased, multiple people had been trying to call Jordan in the days following the men's disappearance, and he even reportedly read messages from people looking for them, but he never responded. The entire time that his friends were dead in the backyard, he was alive inside of his home, and he even ignored another friend pounding on his door for 20 minutes trying to locate the men. According to police, a cause of death for the men has not yet been determined, as they're waiting on autopsy and toxicology results, which could take weeks. But they did state that there were no obvious signs of foul play, and because of this, Jordan has not been arrested or charged with the crime. According to Police Sergeant Jake Bacchina, although Jordan was initially cooperative the night the bodies were found, he doesn't know why he never contacted police to report what happened. Regardless, Sergeant Bacchina has stated, quote, "This case is 100% not being investigated as a homicide." End quote. This has obviously made friends and family of the victims furious. None of them believe Jordan's story, and they're demanding answers. As of right now, the case is still ongoing. A search warrant is in the process of being obtained for Jordan's home, and authorities have recovered all 3 of the victims' cell phones to go through to try and piece together what happened that night. This case is very odd, and adding to the mystery is the fact that none of Jordan's neighbors heard or saw anything suspicious that night or in the following days. As for Jordan, he has reportedly moved out of the home since the incident, and I'm not sure if that's because he was forced to by police because it's considered a crime scene, or if his landlord evicted him because of the situation. Whatever reasoning he has not sat well with the public, and they think it's really suspicious. Jordan is a scientist working in experimental drug trials for HIV, and he's been described as incredibly intelligent but overall weird by the people that know him. Jordan also owns 2 dogs who he says are his life, and at this point, I'm not sure if the dogs were in the home while his friends' bodies were in the backyard, because if they were and he had taken them out, he would have for sure seen them, so that also adds to the mystery. If you have any information regarding this case, please contact 816-474-TIPS.
She helped to solve her own murder beyond the grave. It was the 28th of April in 2010 in Clayton County, Georgia. Now, Candice Parchment was a 15-year-old student who lived with her mum, and as you can see from the photo, she's absolutely stunning. She went to Forest Park High School and was extremely liked. She had this gorgeous smile and she was just such a confident girl. She was also very family-oriented and, like me, really close with her mum. So it was really weird when she didn't come home one day and her mum immediately knew something was wrong. So she rang up the police and she told them, this is just not like my daughter, she always comes home. She wasn't answering her phone and she always answered to her mum. But really infuriatingly, the police just didn't take this case seriously. They were like, oh yeah, she's probably just run away. What do you mean she's probably just run away? But here's the really weird part. Her mum then got a couple of random texts off her phone and they were really blunt. She just knew. You know when you know how somebody texts? I bet you guys have got friends and family members and you just would know if somebody was using their phone and it wasn't them. The one text said, I'm in Tennessee, and the other one just said, I'm okay. That wasn't how Candice spoke. And her mum knew that, well, if it's not Candice using her own phone and she can't get hold of Candice, then she's definitely not okay. So the mum was doing typical mum things in this situation. She was just hunting high and low, driving all around, looking everywhere she could for Candice, and she couldn't find her anywhere. Months and months rumbled on with absolutely no sign of her. I just can't imagine. But then a shocking discovery in November 2010. Under a mattress behind a dumpster were Candice's clothes and her body. Horrifically, she'd been there so long and was so decomposed that she was essentially a skeleton. She had to be identified by those clothes that they found. And I've heard in some cases that relatives say how heartbreaking it is to realise that your loved one has been laid dead somewhere for ages and you just didn't know. I can totally imagine how upsetting that would have been. Even though the person is dead, you still can't even envisage the thought of them just being out there on their own. Police finally decided to start bloody investigating this now. I mean, she's clearly not a runaway, for God's sake. But sadly, the crime scene pretty much didn't have any clues as to who could have done this. With her being so decomposed, it was really difficult to even determine a cause of death. Only slight clue was that her remains were located near an apartment block, so police started wondering if the killer had something to do with that apartment block. But frustratingly, the case really did kind of grind to a halt. They didn't really have anything else to go off of until the following year when Candice's mum was actually moving house. She understandably just wanted to get away from the area where her daughter was found dead, so she was packing up boxes in the house, she was putting stuff away, and she came across Candice's diary. And when she read this, she immediately rang police. She was like, you've got to see what is in this diary. One entry prior to Candice's murder revealed she had been the victim of a terrifying attack where she'd actually feared for her life. This was at the hands of Marche Hickman and Jermaine Robinson in January 2010, so very shortly before, in the grand scheme of things, before she was murdered. They tried to her in an abandoned house, which just sounds absolutely horrific. The diary said Jermaine hit her in the head with a rake and Marche blocked the door. They choked her and tried to unzip her clothes. Bear in mind, this is not only but this girl at the time was 15. I believe these guys at this point were around 18, 19. She'd thankfully been able to fight back and escape, but she was absolutely terrified and obviously thought she was going to die. This now gave police both suspects and a potential motive. Did they want to murder her to shut her up, basically? Marche at this point was actually in prison for burglary charges. Investigators got both of these men for questioning and they basically both turned on each other. It's pretty funny how this happens sometimes. Jermaine decided to testify against Marche, and Marche pleaded guilty to the murder and was sentenced to life in prison without parole plus 20 years. Also got an additional 50 years for attacking Candice and trying to kill her back in 2010. Jermaine got 15 years for the attempted SA on Candice that she documented in her own diary. So she basically got justice from the grave.
This selfie helped to solve a 2-year-old murder case. Can you spot what helped police catch the killer? I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the case of Brittany Gargle. Today's case takes place in Saskatoon, Canada, where Brittany Gargle was born and raised. She wasn't brought up in an ideal environment. She would often have to witness her mum and stepdad viciously arguing. Her biological biological dad wasn't really involved in her life at all, and sadly her mother suffered with addiction. Despite these though, Brittany absolutely flourished. She was described as a popular social girl who was kind, caring, and took full advantage of the great outdoors, her beautiful surroundings. She was a brilliant snowboarder and she loved to hike as well. She was very outdoorsy, and just like so many other teenage girls, she also loved to go shopping with her best friend Cheyenne. On the 25th of March, Brittany, who was now 18, along with Cheyenne, decided that they were going to go for a night out. They got all dressed up, looking absolutely beautiful, snapped a quick selfie, and then headed out on the town. The girls would go to a bar where they had a couple of drinks before heading to a house party, staying there for a couple of hours, then leaving and going to a different bar. Now both of the girls had quite a bit to drink, so they were letting loose a little bit. Cheyenne would later recall Brittany going off and talking to this man who she didn't recognise before Brittany disappeared. Cheyenne sat and waited a little bit for her best friend to return, and when she realised that she wasn't going to, she left the bar and headed to her uncle's apartment, calling it a night. The next morning at approximately 6 a.m, police would receive a horrifying phone call. The person on the other end telling the dispatcher that they had found a body. The body of a young girl. She was lay on her back. She was motionless. She was cold to the touch and had no shoes on. When the police arrived, they didn't find any identification on or nearby this young girl. So instead what they did to help identify her was take pictures of her tattoos. She had some stars on her hand, and then she had a very detailed lion tattoo as well. They posted these out and asked anyone who recognised these tattoos to come forward to identify the person that they had found. And to Cheyenne's horror, when she saw this post, she recognised the tattoos. Those tattoos belonged to her best friend, Brittany. Her post-mortem would reveal that she had died from asphyxiation. Back at the scene, police also discovered a black belt nearby in close proximity to Brittany's body, and so they collected it, believing that it was evidence. When Cheyenne came forward, she would relay onto police everything that happened that night, finishing with Brittany talking to this man before disappearing. However, quickly her story began to show cracks. Police went down to the bar that Cheyenne said that she and Brittany had both went to, the bar that Brittany disappeared from. They combed through the CCTV footage and they couldn't find the man, but they also couldn't find Brittany or Cheyenne. They hadn't been to that bar. They then went to her uncle's apartment building to check the CCTV footage there to back up her claim of going to her uncle's after that bar, but again, she was nowhere to be seen on any of the CCTV footage. She had been caught in two major lies. But why? What was she hiding? The officers would interview Cheyenne's uncle, who at first tried to cover for her and corroborated her story. However, when the police told him that they knew Cheyenne wasn't there because she wasn't on the CCTV, he broke and he told the officers that Cheyenne had begged for his help. Cheyenne told him that she and Brittany, along with two black men, were spending the evening in a motel room where they were excessively drinking and abusing drugs when an argument erupted. She, scared, fled into the bathroom, and the next thing she knew, when she came back out the bathroom, there was Brittany's body lay on the bed. The two black men then pointed a gun at Cheyenne and threatened her, saying that if she didn't help get rid of Brittany's body and keep her mouth shut, that they would kill her as well. When confronted with this story, Cheyenne would completely deny this, but the police just felt that she had to be involved somehow. They would arrest her on separate charges relating to drugs and shoplifting, while they investigated to try and figure out what happened to Brittany. Cheyenne's auntie would eventually come to the police, and what she had to tell them was harrowing. She said that on the night of the murder, Cheyenne had came to her house pleading and crying for help. She told her auntie that she and Brittany had got into a massive argument that just exploded out of nowhere and went way too far. That argument resulted in Cheyenne whacking Brittany over the head with something before strangling her with a belt. The auntie glanced out of the car that Cheyenne, who was drunk by the way, was driving, and there was Brittany in the front seat, black and blue with some bruises and motionless. This auntie claimed that she was too scared to come forward. However, as the months had went by without her saying anything, the guilt of knowing this was beginning to eat her up, and that is what forced her to come forward. Despite both of these stories showing that Cheyenne was somehow involved in Brittany's murder, the police had no concrete evidence proving that she was actually involved. That was until this selfie was reanalyzed. In 2017, an investigator decided to take another look at the selfie that the girls had taken just before they went out on the night that Brittany was murdered. And they could not believe what they saw, because there on this photo is Cheyenne wearing the black belt that they had stored in evidence that they believed was the murder weapon. They retrieved it out of evidence and it was covered in Cheyenne's DNA and also Brittany's DNA. And it was consistent with Brittany's cause of death, asphyxiation. Cheyenne would be charged with the manslaughter of Brittany Gargle, which she pled guilty to, and would be handed a sentence of 7 years imprisonment.
After dating a Backstreet Boy, this school teacher lured a teenage boy into her car to her. This story starts way back in 1995 when Deborah LaFave attended East Bay High School in Florida. Her first boyfriend was Nick Carter from the Backstreet Boys, and they dated for about a year before she ended up cheating on him with a girl and they broke up. She then went on a couple of years later to become a glamour model for a magazine called Makes and Models, but she had aspirations of becoming a teacher. She graduated college in 2002 and got a job at the Greco Middle School in Temple Terrace in Florida, and shortly after married a guy called Owen LaFave. But Owen had no idea what he was letting himself in for and what kind of woman Deborah was. Now, he was pretty suspicious actually that she was having some kind of affair, but he was actually thinking that it was probably with a colleague at the school, not one of the young students. It was June 2004 that this whole sick situation started to unravel. Now, bear in mind this student was 14 years old and I obviously can't name him for legal reasons. The boy's mum just started to feel like something was off. She'd noticed that Deborah, the teacher, had been wearing really inappropriate outfits to teach these students. She was in like mini skirts and she also seemed to be giving them a lot of attention. And her son seemed to be spending more and more time communicating with her, which was just so strange. Like, why does a 23-year-old woman need to be texting a 14-year-old schoolboy? Turned out that this boy and Deborah had got close on a school trip to SeaWorld Orlando, and she was just pushing so many boundaries. She was like almost pushing and pushing and pushing until things were just so inappropriate. At one point she gave this boy detention, but this was just a total excuse to get him on his own. When he did come into her class, she exposed herself to him and kissed him, and things really escalated to a sickening degree. It's believed that she had both S and OS with this child on 4 occasions. Once this was even at her marital home that she shared with Owen. I don't know where the hell Owen was. This also happened in her classroom and in the back seat of her car. All of this ended up coming out. As I said, the mum was suspicious anyway, but I believe a family member ended up spotting the pair of them out together and told the mum, and this all just came out when the mum confronted the little boy. She was horrified. She was like fully grilling him and he just admitted everything. He even obviously had like text messages to prove what had been going on. He immediately rang the police and they took a statement from this little boy and just confirmed everything that the mum had feared. They ended up even getting the boy to communicate with Deborah and secretly recorded their conversation. And the next part is crazy. Her defense in court said that she would be too pretty to send to prison. Apparently she didn't view herself as a criminal because she said she was in love with this boy. She obviously got banned from teaching ever again, but got absolutely 0 prison time. She was arrested again actually in 2007 for violating her probation by speaking to a 17-year-old restaurant worker, but I don't think anything came of that.
People do not vanish into thin air and just disappear forever. That just doesn't happen. There are so many options of what could have happened, but that is just not one of them. Brian Randall Schaefer. He was born and raised in Ohio. He was the oldest of 2 boys to his parents. He graduated high school in 1997 and went on to study medicine at Ohio State University. In 2006, Brian was 27 years old and he was in his 2nd year at OSU. It was a tough year for Brian. He lost his mom, unfortunately, to cancer earlier that year, but he was doing what he could to keep his head up and he was excited about his future. He had a group of friends he loved and often hung out with, as well as a girlfriend that he adored, a girl named Alexis Wagner. Brian and Alexis were planning a trip together for spring break, break, they were going to go to Miami, and he was really excited about it, and his friends also started to wonder about the possibility of him proposing to Alexis on that trip. But before they left town, Brian wanted to have a regular night out with his friends, which was routine. He did this all the time. March 31st of 2006, it was a Friday. The students were all in a good mood. It was the beginning of spring break. Spirits were high. Alexis drove to her parents' house in Toledo before their trip, and Brian stayed in Columbus. Before going out, he called Alexis, told her goodnight, said that he loved her, and they agreed to meet up Monday to fly to Miami. That night, Brian went out with his best friend and his roommate, Clint. Their first stop was at Ugly Tuna Saloon. They hung out there for a little bit and then left to go to another place where they met up with one of Clint's friends, a girl named Meredith Reed. After a while, Meredith drove all three of them back to the Ugly Tuna Saloon. In security camera footage, you can see all three of them rode the escalator to the second-story entrance at 1:15 a.m. They ran into other friends and kind of lost each other throughout the night. It was a big crowd. There was live music there that night, and at the end of the night, when the place was closing, Clint and Meredith found each other, but they couldn't find Brian. They tried to call him several times to see where he was, but they couldn't get a hold of him. They couldn't find him, so they just decided to leave. After all, Brian was a 27-year-old man. They didn't necessarily feel the need to stick around and wait for him to show up. The next day, Brian did not pick up calls from his dad nor from his brother, but it wouldn't be until Monday morning, when Brian missed his flight he had with his girlfriend, that everyone in his life would connect and realize that none of them had heard from Brian since that Friday night, and by the time they realized it, Brian had already been missing for 2 full days. Brian's brother went to his apartment to go look for Brian, but he wasn't there. Alexis was there. She had just gotten there to look for Brian as well, but Brian was nowhere to be found, and his car was just left in the parking lot as it would be any other day. The only thing they knew so far was that Brian was missing, but besides that, they didn't really have anything, so investigators decided the best course of action would be to retrace his steps. As we know, at 1:15 in the morning, Brian, Meredith, and Clint were seen entering Ugly Tuna, and cameras captured Meredith and Clint leaving at the end of the night. But what is so baffling about this case is that Brian was never seen again on any camera leaving through any entrance or exit. He was seen walking in. He was never seen walking out, and both exits were covered by cameras, as well as the escalator that you needed to take to get there. The only way out without security camera coverage would have been through a service exit, but that exit led to a construction site with doors to the street, and police stated that that area was heavily under construction and it would have been difficult for anyone to even attempt to walk out of there. Besides, that night, that door wasn't even available for people to use because of the construction that was going on outside of it. The last time that Brian was caught on camera was around 2 in the morning on the escalator. He was seen talking to 2 girls, but even then he was still inside of the building. Then he leaves the girls and walks back towards the entrance. The detective on this case said he is 100% sure every single person that went into Ugly Tuna can be seen on video leaving except for Brian. As part of the investigation, there were up to 50 officers looking for Brian, and police questioned everyone close to Brian, and they were asked to take a lie detector test. And everyone did, and everyone passed except for Brian's best friend and roommate, Clint. Clint, one of the last people to have seen Brian, refused to take a lie detector test. And on another weird note, for some reason, those 2 girls that Brian was seen talking to, they were not asked to take a test. With nothing else to go off, investigators needed to consider the possibility that Brian may have left on his own accord. But that would make no sense for many reasons, one of them being how close Brian was to his dad and his brother. And another big one being his girlfriend, Alexis, that he was clearly excited about having a future with. He called her that night, told her that he loved her. They made plans to meet up on Monday to go on their trip. And again, there was even talk of him proposing potentially on that trip because of how good their relationship had been going. After his disappearance, Alexis called Brian's phone every single night for 6 months straight. And every single time it went straight to voicemail, except for one night in September when she tried to call his phone and it actually rang 3 times. Alexis, rightfully so, thought it was weird and thought it could mean something, but Brian's cell phone provider decided that it was just a computer glitch. Brian's GPS on his phone was not enabled, so his location couldn't be tracked, but a ping from his phone was detected at a cell tower 14 miles northwest of Columbus. However, neither his bank accounts, credit cards, nor cell phone have shown any activity since his disappearance. Brian's family has always insisted that there was no motive for Brian to run away or for him to fake his own disappearance. They thought that Brian had way more that he was looking forward to than anything that he would potentially be trying to escape. It just makes no sense. There really hasn't been any movement on this case at all. There was a slight chance of hope back in 2020 when a photo from an unhoused man in Mexico went viral because people thought that it looked like Brian, but the FBI determined and announced that it was not him. In September of 2008, Brian's father tragically lost his life in a freak accident, and Brian's brother is the only person from his immediate family that is still alive today and is still looking for Brian. My questions: Clint, a person who claimed to be Brian's best friend and was his roommate, didn't notify anyone that Brian was missing at all, and then he refused to take the lie detector test. That's suspicious. And also the girls on the escalators, why were they not questioned further if they were probably the last people to speak to Brian? Could have been something so small, like maybe Brian told him that he was planning to go somewhere else after that place. I don't know, it's just weird because obviously somebody knows something and someone is keeping a secret. If he was still alive today, Brian Schaefer would be 42 years old. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation released an age progression picture of what Brian would look like today in hopes that someone might spot him should he still be alive. For anyone who does, the Central Ohio Crime Stoppers has offered a $100,000 reward. Somebody knows something. There's literally just no other option. That is all I have for today's case. Let me know what your thoughts and theories are on this case if you have heard about it before, but thank you for spending time with me today. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day, make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
She would jump from the top floor of a 21-story high building over 20 years ago, and we still have no idea who she is. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the unidentified Wembley Point woman. Because she is unidentified for the purpose of this video, I'm going to refer to her as Jane, as in Jane Doe. On the 29th of October 2004, shortly before 9 AM, Jane walked into the Wembley Point building. This was a 21-story high building which had many offices and businesses inside. She confidently walked in and through the building and was able to get in with ease because the security wasn't that great. I remember when I used to work in an office building, you had to use a key card to kind of swipe to physically get in the building, but there was nothing like that here. Jane was able to just walk in. She would get into a lift with some other people who were either visiting or working at the Wembley Point building, and these people would describe Jane as being distressed. In response to her distress, one of the men inside the lift said, quote, "Cheer up, love, it might never happen." Although I don't know what he is saying this in response to. What might never happen? Jane would make her way to the top floor of the building where there was a cafe/canteen. This was mainly for the employees. It wasn't like a Starbucks or a Pret or a Costa, not a cafe that someone off the street would come in to visit. She would buy a coffee, take it to a window seat and sat sipping it while smoking a Marlboro tab and flicking through the newspaper. People who saw Jane would describe her as being petite, potentially between 5'1" and 5'3". She was very smartly dressed, wearing a black polo underneath a crew-neck jumper with a maroon coloured bomber jacket. She also wore smart black pants and some black Skechers trainers. Jane sat for a couple of minutes, puffing on her cigarette, sipping her coffee, flicking through the newspaper, when in a split second, she climbed up onto the table, opened up a window and threw herself out, falling 21 stories to her death. Her body would be recovered from the River Brent, where police found no personal items on her. She had no identification, she had no house keys, no car keys, not a purse or a bank card or anything that they could use to try and find out who this woman was. All that she had were the clothes on her back and a couple of bits of jewellery, including a watch, a couple of rings and some stud earrings. Back inside the building, Jane had left behind her very few possessions. This included this abstract oil painting, which now, in hindsight, has an eerie feel to it. She also left just over £5 in cash. She left a 7-day bus pass, which she had bought 3 days earlier in the Seven Sisters area of Tottenham, and a black carrier bag which had the letters CPNY on. Many people speculate that that stands for Central Park, New York. Not a single person inside of the Wembley Point building recognised Jane or knew who she was. The way that she confidently walked into the building, the way that she found the cafe, and the way that she knew the windows didn't have locks on, it gave the officers the impression that she knew the building well. But like I say, no one inside could identify her. If she did work there, surely someone would be able to, a manager, a co-worker, anyone else who would often say her in passing. But sadly, Jane was a stranger to everyone inside. Despite the best efforts of the police, they have never been able to identify Jane. No one has ever reported her missing, and I believe that only one person has ever come forward to say that they recognise her at least. This was a man who said that he had saw Jane in the weeks leading up to her death and that she was upset because her boyfriend was going through some health issues. But even this man didn't know who she was. I did read that they investigated the area of Tottenham where she bought that bus pass from, and I believe at the time operating in that area was like a hostel or like a bed sit, something there for asylum seekers who came from West Africa. If she was an asylum seeker, is it possible that she has never been reported missing because she has no family here? The Wembley Point woman is believed to be aged between 20 and 40 years old. She is petite in height, being between 5'1" and 5'3". Her ethnicity is potentially Afro-Caribbean. It is possible that she lived a transient lifestyle. Maybe she couch surfed, maybe she was in and out of hostels, maybe she did odd jobs, maybe the jobs that she did work were all cash in hand. It has been over 20 years since this woman threw herself out of the window of a 21-story high building. And to this day, she remains unidentified. She deserves her name back, and her family, friends, and loved ones deserve to know what happened to her.
Oh yeah, and you wonder why girls are scared to be outside, why girls are scared to literally just exist, is because men like this exist. June 24th of 2002, it was a Monday. For a lot of people, just a regular day getting ready for work or the start of a new week. But for 15-year-old Kara Robinson Chamberlain, it would be the day that would change the trajectory of her life forever. It was June in Lexington, South Carolina. School was out, Kara was excited to hang out with her friends and do all the things that a regular 15-year-old girl would do. That day, Kara woke up at her friend's house after they had a sleepover. They were chatting, decided what they wanted to do that day, and given that it was June, it was hot out, they decided that they wanted to go to the lake. So they called their moms to let them know their plan. Heather, who was Kara's friend, said that her mom asked her to please water the plants before they left, and given that Heather still needed to shower, Kara said, "You go shower, I will water the plants." Heather went inside to go shower, and Kara stayed outside and began watering the plants with the hose. In the front yard, she has the water hose in hand when a car pulls into the driveway and a man gets out of the car. A white man, middle-aged, wearing a button-down shirt, jeans, and a hat, holding a binder underneath his arm. He looks at Kara and explains that he was just around the neighborhood passing out brochures. He asked her if her parents were home. Kara said, "Well, this isn't my house, this is my friend's house." To which the man responded, "Okay, well, what about her parents? Are her parents home?" And Kara responded by saying, "No, her mom isn't home right now." The man looked at Kara, and in regards to the brochures that he was supposedly passing out, he said, "Okay, well, I'll just leave these with you then," and he started to approach her. Little did Kara know, the man standing before her, walking towards her, was a serial killer the police were looking for. The man was Richard Ivanitz. Before crossing paths with Kara, he ended the lives of a 12-year-old girl, a 25-year-old girl, a 20-year-old girl, a 16-year-old girl, a 15-year-old girl, and her sister, who was only 12 years old. That is the man that was standing in that front yard with Kara, and before she knew it, he had pulled out a weapon, pushed it against her head, ordering her to follow him and get inside of his vehicle, specifically instructing her to get inside of a plastic bin in the back seat of his car. Kara, only 15 years old in that moment, realized that he had the advantage. He was bigger than her, he was threatening her, and he had a weapon, and in that moment she felt as if she had no other option but to follow his demands. She got inside of that box in the back seat of his vehicle, and Richard started driving. In describing that moment in time, Kara has said, quote, "My survival mechanism said, all right, let's gather as much information as we can. Fear barely even kicked in. The human will to survive and the survival mechanism really just can't be underestimated," end quote. Sitting in that vehicle, Kara found the serial number on the inside of the plastic container that he forced her inside of, repeating it over and over to herself to memorize it. She started counting the turns that they were making as they were driving, trying to memorize those to know where he was taking her and how far he was taking her. She noticed there was classic rock playing on the radio station. She took note of that. She smelled that he was She took note of that. It was like every sense of her, sight, smell, and sound, was being put to use to memorize things that would end up helping her in her escaping the situation that she realized that she was now in. Which, by the way, is incredible that she was that quick on her feet to start thinking that way. Before reaching their final destination, Richard pulled the car over on the side of the road and restrained Kara's hands with handcuffs. He put cloth inside of her mouth and then closed the lid on that plastic container. Then they made their way to Richard's apartment, which was filthy. It was dirty, messy, probably stinky, and full of things. He had pets, a lizard, a guinea pig, and other small pets. Richard told Kara that he was going to be taking the restraints off of her, and he warned her not to scream. Kara, still being clever and very intelligent, was trying her best to keep her cool so that 1, Richard wouldn't lose his shit and so that he would hopefully let his guard down, 2, so that she would gain some of his trust by making him believe that she wasn't going to try and run away, and 3, so that she could find time to subtly collect more information about him, given that she was now inside of his apartment. And she she did find more things that could be beneficial. She found the names of his doctor and his dentist from documents that were on his fridge. She also did gain his trust a little bit. He confided in her and started talking more about him, telling her that he used to be in the military and that he was discharged from the Navy. But even though Kara was trying to do everything in her power to try and make things go in her favor, she did realize that men don't just kidnap teenage girls to hang out with them. And then it happened. Richard Ivanitz essayed and Kara for the next 18 hours, all while shaming her, attempting to manipulate her by telling her that she would have the option to go to the police and report this, but repeating to her that if she did, she would always just be known as the girl who got attacked. Back at home, Kara's friend Heather quickly realized that her friend had vanished, and within hours of being taken, Kara was officially named a missing person. With not only Heather, but Heather's mom and Kara's mom determined from the start to do everything they had to do in order to find her. As nighttime approached, Kara was restrained with handcuffs tied to the bed frame, and her foot was also tied to the foot of the bed. She would be sleeping in the same bed as her abductor. The next morning, in the crack of dawn, Kara woke up to the sound of this disgusting, strange man sleeping next to her, and when she was awake and he wasn't, she knew that her time to escape was now. She had one chance, and it was now or never. Being as quiet as she possibly could be, she tiptoed towards the front door and she made a run for it. She ran as fast as she could towards a car in a parking lot and asked the two men sitting inside of it if they could please take her to the police station. They did, and she told authorities everything that she had just been through. And even though Kara looked to be in distress, still with handcuffs around her wrist and with no shoes on, Kara said she still felt as if the officer she was speaking to didn't believe her. However, luckily, because Kara was so smart and observant, she was able to take them to the exact apartment building she had just escaped from. And with the help of Kara's description and the property manager, the police were able to find the exact unit they were looking for. But by the time they got there, Richard had already escaped. He had fled, but inside of his apartment, they found a locked locker. Inside that locker, investigators found old newspapers that went back 5 years, newspapers of the unsolved murders of 3 girls who they would connect him to later on, and finding that evidence inside of his apartment led investigators to realize that this guy was likely responsible for doing way more than just abducting Kara. And because of that, the FBI was immediately called and the search for Richard began. They were able to track him down to Sarasota, Florida with the help of his own sister, who informed authorities that Richard had called her. He had called his sister to let her know that he was hiding out in a hotel room because he admitted to having committed, quote, more crimes than he can remember, end quote. He asked his sister to meet up with him, but his sister thankfully just turned around and gave that information about his location to police, who were able to find him. And when they did, a high-speed chase took place. Richard was stopped and attacked by a police dog, but before they could actually put him in handcuffs, Richard took his own weapon and unalived himself. But although the investigation to Kara's kidnapping was over, her story, how brave she was, how smart she was, helped investigators tie Richard to the unsolved murders of 16-year-old Sophia Silva and sisters 15-year-old Kristen Lisk and 12-year-old Catherine Lisk, helping those families finally find some sort of closure. Richard is also suspected in 3 other murders and in many SA cases. After Kara's successful escape, she got to meet the families of those 3 girls whose stories she helped solve. She has stated, quote, "It was one of the most important things that's ever happened to me because it brought home the importance of what I did, because I felt like, wow, I'm actually giving these families something that they would have never gotten without me. Just the closure of knowing that the person responsible for their daughter's death is no longer here," end quote. Kara Robinson Chamberlain later became a school resource officer and an investigator in child SA cases. She got married to Joe Chamberlain, and the two of them had 2 sons together. To this day, Kara continues to use her story to inspire others to tell theirs and to help spread the word and provide advice on, quote, how to feel, how to support, how to speak to victims of crime, and how to embrace a survivor mentality, end quote. I also wanted to end this video with a quote from her. It says, quote, "One of the things is helping women to see themselves in others, because I think that it can be so empowering when we just speak to someone who understands what we've been through. I would love to help them tell their stories in a way that really lets them take ownership of the story and really empowers them to take back that power," end quote. Kara Robinson is an amazing, inspiring person, no doubt about it. She survived something that unfortunately some girls don't. But not only that, even with the trauma and the healing that comes with that, she has time and time again put others before herself, putting her feelings aside, speaking about things that I'm sure are incredibly hard to speak about, probably traumatizing, definitely traumatizing, to use her story to help others and to making sure that people that have been through similar things as her never feel alone. It gives me goosebumps, it really does. That is all I have for today's story. Thank you guys for spending time with me today and for listening to Kara's story. I hope that you guys are all having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day, make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
This is the story of Tori more. Born in 1991, Tory was born and raised in Montgomery County. Now, it's not a lot on his childhood, but it is documented that he was diagnosed with severe schizophrenia in his 20s. Around early 2021, Tory met 25-year-old Denise Middleton. Now, Denise had just graduated cosmetology school and she was on her way to becoming a professional hairstylist. And about a year later, the two not only decided to make their relationship official, they also decided to move together. They got an apartment in Silver Spring, Maryland. And around spring of that same year, Denise discovered that she was pregnant and she was happy about this. But she was even more happy when she found out her baby was a boy. She was texting her family saying that she couldn't wait to be a boy mom. She even named the baby Ezekiel. But the excitement didn't last long because by mid-2022, the relationship had turned hostile. Tory had become extremely paranoid. He was isolating Denise from her family. And by late September, Denise's family noticed that all her communication had stopped. Tory was controlling her phone calls. She was not allowed to talk to outsiders unless Tory agreed to it. On October 9th, 2022, at around 7 p.m., the couple returned home from an outing. In the lobby of the apartment, they started to argue. The argument turned physical when Tory aggressively forced Denise inside of the elevator. She's 8 months pregnant at this point, and it was another gentleman trying to get on the elevator, and Tory said no. Pushed that man right on out of the elevator and said, "Catch the next one." When the elevator got to the 7th floor, you can tell that Denise did not want to get out that elevator, but Tory was kind of forcing her with his hand gestures. When the two got to their apartment, the arguing continued. It got so bad that Tory pulled out his gun. Now, when Denise seen the gun, she started to run. He put 7 bullets in her back. Denise and her baby died instantly, and Tory went to the refrigerator, grabbed himself an iced tea, and left the apartment. On the surveillance camera, you can see him just drinking his tea, casually walking out of the building. He fled the state because he's thinking that somebody heard the shots and the police are going to be coming. So he made his way to Washington, D.C. And while he's there, he's Googling, how long does it take for a body to decay? How can I move a dead body without someone looking? Then he decides to go further south to distance himself. So he made his way to North Carolina. But North Carolina was still too close. So he bought himself a bus ticket and went clear across the country to the West Coast, California. Now, while he's in California, he's seeing that there's no warrant out for his arrest. Nobody's looking for Denise. So on November 4th, he made his way back to Silver Spring. Tory returned to his apartment, moved Denise's body into the room, and put a blanket over it and started living his life like just went on with his life like nothing ever happened. He's coming home, he's eating, he's sleeping, he's in and out of the apartment, just like things are normal. It wasn't until 26 days later on December 8th when Tory decided to go to the gas station directly across the street from his apartment to get an iced tea. Now, he's banned from this gas station. He actually got banned in October. He got banned because he don't know how to motherfucking act. So he walked himself right back in this gas station on December 8th. Now he went to go get his iced tea and came up to the counter to pay. And I don't know what escalated. I don't know if the clerk noticed that it was him and that he wasn't supposed to be there, but it turned physical quick. Tory started picking up merchandise and throwing it at the clerk. The clerk picked up a metal pole from behind the counter and trying to defend himself, so he started swinging it at Tory. Tory backed up, reached in his vest, and pulled out his gun. He shot the clerk 3 times. The first time, the clerk dropped. He then, as you can see, reached behind the counter and shot 2 more times. The clerk died on the scene, but Tory grabbed his tea and casually walked out the store and walked back to his apartment. Mind you, while all this happened, people are actively in and out of the store. Everybody's seen him. Plus, the cameras at that gas station was 4K. With all that evidence, plus him being banned from the store, Tory was easy to track down. At 6 a.m. on December 9th, the SWAT team was knocking down his door. And what was he doing? Sleeping peacefully in his bed. When SWAT knocked down the door, that smell hit them. They was not expecting to find the mummified body of Denise. They coming to arrest him for a shooting at the gas station. So they can't believe their eyes. Tory was immediately arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. They included his unborn child as well. And in interrogation, he had told the detectives that an intruder killed Denise while he was away. He said that it was not him. Never mind the fact that the bullets were a match to the same gun that you had that was laying on the bed when SWAT bust in your apartment. He pled not guilty by reason of insanity, and he had 2 trials, one for the gas station clerk, which started in May of 2024, and one for Denise, which started in November of 2024. And during his trial, he kept trying to push the schizophrenia. He kept trying to push that he was just not right in the head, and they rejected that shit. During the trial with Denise, it had came out that her father was actively looking for her. When Tory had fled the state and just left her body there, her father actually went to the apartment and knocked on the door, tried to handle, and the door had opened. He just did not enter the apartment. On May 30th, 2025, he received 3 consecutive life sentences. His ass will not be getting out, and rightfully so, because anybody who could just live with a decaying corpse is insane to me. You going to sleep, waking up, cooking, eating, sharing, like it's nothing. Like it's normal. I'm afraid of you. And the people in the apartments, y'all didn't smell nothing? What y'all think, Yellow Tape?
Another pregnant mother died after hospitals refused to treat her because of abortion bans. Josely Barnica went to the hospital with cramps and excessive bleeding at 17 weeks pregnant when she was told a miscarriage was in progress and inevitable. Her cervix was 9 centimeters dilated, so the chances of infection were very high. Doctors typically offer a medication to either speed up labor or empty her uterus, but because her baby still technically had a heartbeat, doctors chose not to intervene unless it was a medical emergency. A term that abortion laws don't even have a definition to, so they don't even know what is considered a medical emergency. Josely suffered 2 days of excruciating pain waiting for her baby to no longer have a heartbeat so that doctors can actually medicate her to deliver the fetus. Josely got sent back home. Her bleeding never stopped. It actually got worse, and then she kept getting high fevers and a horrible infection because of the lack of treatment she received in the hospital for those 2 days. Josely's husband basically carried her back into the hospital worse than when she left the last time. Josely later died from a life-threatening infection called sepsis, where her organs literally failed on her, all because she was not treated like a priority. If she had been properly treated in all 3 of her hospital visits, she would have survived. Josely had a 4-year-old daughter waiting for her mommy and a new sibling at home, but now they both won't go home. Andy Thurman, Candy Miller, and many other women suffered the same fate. Pregnant mothers who were denied the proper treatment and died as a result of it.
This is the story of Layla Souders and Jose Padilla. Before I get into this story, I want to give a trigger warning. This is about an infant child, and the details surrounding this case are sickening. So scroll if you have to. Born in Dauphin County, Pennsylvania, Layla was a rebellious teen. At only 14 years old, on January 21st, 2019, she decided that she was going to sneak out the house to meet her boyfriend. And the two decided that they were going to run away together. Now, I don't know if she had done this before because her parents did not report her missing until the 23rd. Now, when they reported her missing, her face was plastered all over Pennsylvania's news. It wasn't until the 25th at around 4 a.m. she was found with her boyfriend in another part of Pennsylvania. She was processed and sent back home with her family. All charges were dropped in this case. But that same year, she met a young man named Wiki LaRock. Now, her and Wiki's relationship started off rocky. He ended up going to jail over an attempted homicide case. But despite the legal troubles, the two made it work. Layla Layla became pregnant around early 2024, and Wiki was happy about that. He was accompanying her with the doctor visits, the ultra scans. Around mid 2024, they had their gender reveal and found out that they were having a girl. And on the tape, the two looked like a happy couple. He even named their daughter Ione. But around August, something shifted in the relationship. Wiki was financially and emotionally ready to support his family, but Layla started pulling away and he was confused by this. He had said on an interview that we tried to build a family, but I guess this is not what she wanted. By the end of 2024, Layla had completely called it quits. She not only breaks up with Wiki, she cuts off all ties. And the next thing he knows, she's living with 24-year-old Jose Padilla. Mind you, she's about 7 months pregnant at this time. Jose literally just got to the US of A on May 2nd, 2024, and he was on a temporary visa, only supposed to been in the US for 3 months, but he done got over here, met pregnant Layla, and they done moved in together. She had her baby in November of 2024, and Wiki was not in the hospital room, but Jose was. Wiki tried several times after the baby was born to set up a meeting so he could see the baby, but Jose called him and said, "Hey man, leave my family alone and worry about yourself. Go ahead and move on with your life because we don't need you over here." And he completely backed off, but just a few months later, his daughter was dead. On March 28th, 2025, at around 2 p.m., Jose had called 911 because 4-month-old Ione had suddenly stopped breathing. He told the dispatchers that he was feeding her bottle and she started having seizures. He said that she has been suffering from seizures for several weeks now. When the police arrived, they immediately started doing CPR until EMTs arrived. She was rushed to Penn State Medical Center, but despite the medical efforts, she never regained consciousness, so at around 6 p.m., they had pronounced her dead. The doctor is thinking that the infant had just died from a seizure until he started examining her body closer. He seen that something was terribly wrong here. She had a compound fracture in her right femur. She had a skull fracture. She had healing rib fractures. She had traumatic injuries in her brain, her neck, and her chest. Several of her injuries were in different stages of healing, which means they all didn't happen at the same time. And they didn't align with performing CPR or having an accidental fall. Her official cause of death was multiple traumatic injuries, and the manner of death was ruled a homicide. So they immediately put Jose in custody because Layla was at work at the time of the 911 call. Digging deeper into Jose's record, the police quickly found out that he was in the US illegally. His visa had been up. He also had a fake social security card on him, and he admitted to using it to find a job. But it was when they confiscated his phone the ugly truth came out. See, Jose had growing resentment towards the baby. He could not stand that that baby was not his blood. He would text Layla crazy shit damn near every day while she was at work and he was watching the baby. One message said, "I hate looking at her every day." Another message said, "I hate that you felt her for 8 fucking months. A fucking life that's not ours. I would love to love her, but I swear I can't." Another message said, "I don't love her and I will never love her. We will constantly fight all our life." And he told her that he was fed up and that they should give the baby up for adoption. During interrogation, Jose is starting to come clean about what he did to the infant. And they're also interrogating Layla. And what is she doing? She over there lying for Jose. She is telling the detectives that she dropped the baby in the shower. They like, "Girl, we know the truth." She quickly admitted that she lied and that she knew that the abuse was going on. She would actually cancel doctor appointments just so they wouldn't see the bruises on the baby. This baby has been suffering from ongoing abuse since late February of 2025. Layla admitted that Jose has been abusing her for weeks. He would hit her in the head, he would hit her in the thigh, and he would kick whatever chair she was sitting in really hard. Jose admitted on March 22nd that he had hit the baby so hard that she had fell unconscious. He performed CPR on her to wake her back up. He then sent a video to Layla while she was at work. The baby was actively having a seizure. Neither one of them took the baby to the hospital. On March 27th, a day before the 911 call, while Layla was at work, Jose sent her a picture of the baby's leg and saying, by the way, one of her legs are fatter than the other. Mind you, her leg was broke. Still, no medical attention. Instead, he Google searched home remedies to fix it. Layla was charged with third-degree murder, but that quickly changed when they realized she knew. She knew exactly what was going on, and she continued to leave that baby knowing that her life was in danger. So they changed third-degree murder to first-degree murder. Jose was charged with first-degree murder until they dug a little deeper in his phone. They found photos of his genitals in the 4-month-old's mouth. He was charged with first-degree murder, deviant sexual intercourse with a child, sexual abuse of children, and child pornography. They are seeking the death penalty for him, and you can kill them both. Really, this case is still ongoing. There is no trial date yet, but the two will remain in custody until their trial. But my mouth dropped reading this last night because how could you do this to a helpless child? RIP to this baby, man. I hate them. I hate them. And when I seen Layla going from the court to the van, that bitch had the biggest smile on her face. What y'all doing in that jail, man? They need to get got. They got to get got. Both of them. We're going to circle back to this case because I have to see what happened to these two. But this one took a lot out of me, y'all. I'm done for the weekend, but what y'all think?